What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the W.A.D.E Concept Podcast. Kelsey's already in the chat. Give me the thumbs up. Back at you, girl. Yeah, guys, welcome in. Today is our Wednesday midweek episode, and it's a special one this week. We have, as I explained in the Monday podcast, we have probably one of the most important fights in the next couple of weeks here, possibly the year. With Dustin, Porier, and Khabib Nurmagomedov facing off at UFC 242. By the way, guys, today's podcast will not be in audio form just because I'm messing around with the setup a little bit. So you won't have this one on Apple Podcasts. But this morning, if you follow me on Instagram, by the way, follow me on Instagram. The link is right in the description below the video. I have gotten back on Apple Podcasts, so you guys can subscribe over there. Make sure you hit that 5-star review if you guys are liking what we're doing. Today won't be just because I had some issues with the audio, but we'll be back up next Monday with the audio version. Crisp and clean like normal. Just today, I'm trying to set up for Saturday, and my audio setup is a little weird, so I've got to switch some things around to make sure that my audio is good and doesn't play back my computer sound through the live stream because I want to still hear, but it's illegal for you guys to be able to hear it through my stream. So can't do that. Fixing some stuff around, so it won't be on there today, but go to the W.A.D.E Concept Podcast on iTunes. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you leave a 5-star review. And if you're not subscribed here yet, please, this is our bread and butter. This is where we started. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button if you like what we're doing. All right, all plugs gone now. Let's get right into it, man. Today is our predictions episode, and I'm telling you guys, I've been back and forth. I've slept on it. I've done, everything that a person can do to try to figure out my picks for UFC 242, and it's mainly the main card and obviously the main event itself. But throughout the card, there's some really, really high level fights from guys with smaller names like Davi Ramos, and however many 25 billion of Khabib's team members that are on the card. But there's a lot to look at in this card, and while the names aren't as big, other than the main event and the co-main, there are some really good fighters that you're going to be seeing for a long time on this card, just like we saw last week with UFC Shenzhen. This card is have that same quality of fighters without the name recognition, so it's a good parallel. We're jumping right into, and then obviously in the main event we have Khabib has become one of the biggest stars in MMA, and obviously being 27-0, one of the greatest fighters in MMA history. Versus Dustin Porier, and you don't get a better story than Dustin Porier. So both these guys obviously looking for a legacy win, looking for the biggest name in their division at this point because Conor is out and Tony Ferguson's on the horizon for the winner. So we're going to get into picks today. I don't know how excited I am to give up my picks because every time I divulge my predictions, I lose. When I was gone off the podcast for a little bit and I would just talk to Kelsey or whoever about my picks for fight cards, I'd be, undefeated damn near. And there's no way to prove this, so before you guys get on my back, whatever. It's not just hearsay. I have factual, I have a reputable opinion in Kelsey. She knows, all right? She will tell you. But as soon as I get on camera and as soon as I pick for you guys for whatever reason, I just go the opposite way. But not this time. We're getting all picks right. Main card, all picks right. That's just facts. And if not, I'll come on this podcast next Monday and we'll figure something out. Maybe we'll do like some kind of stream where it's like a punishment stream or some kind of reaction stream. I've got to do some kind of punishment for getting these wrong. You guys let me know in the comments. But I'm willing to put it on the line. I'm confident this week. Except for the main event. Anyway, let's get started. So, UFC 242 in Abu Dhabi this Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. We are going to be live stream reacting to the actual pay-per-view all the way leading up. We'll do the early prelims, which I think start at 7:15. Wow. Okay, 7:15 we'll get up and do the I'm not a big morning guy, but I will obviously get up for you guys. So 7:15 a.m. This Saturday, that's Pacific time, so 10:15 on the East Coast. That'll be the early prelims. Then we're going to go over to the preliminary card on FX. That might be an issue for the stream. I'll figure that out. And then the main card, obviously, will be on pay-per-view. We'll be watching all three all the way through from 7:15 until probably I mean, probably 1 p.m. Pacific. We'll watch the entire card, react, everybody jump in, and we'll have a good time, man. I love when the chat gets filled up with people and I can talk to and react to the fights with and chat about whatever's going on the card and in the MMA world outside of that actual card. So it'll be a fun card for us. But we'll get right into predictions. So our main card, we have a couple of guys that I'm going to be honest with you, I know are a part of Khabib's team, but I don't know too much about. And pronunciations are going to be another one where it's just struggle bus, but we'll figure it out. So we have Mairbek Taisumov versus Carlos Diego Ferreira. Oh, you saw that tongue roll, though. Another lightweight fight. Mairbek is 27-5. Carlos Diego Ferreira is, I've got to quit doing that, is 15-2. Both guys a little bit older, 31, 34. Reach pretty much identical, height identical. I'm assuming that Mairbek is going to have a wrestling background coming into this fight. Again, don't know too much about the guy or Carlos, to be quite honest. These two guys are not huge on my radar, but just off of the ability to have to pick all the fights on the main card, just to get this one kind of out of the way, we're going to go with Mairbek Taisumov. And I think it's mostly because he's a part of, in my estimation, he's a part of Khabib's team. And I usually don't pick a lot against Khabib's team, knowing that the killers that come out of the Eagles MMA gym. And I don't know if he's a part of that specific team, but I have a feeling. So we're going to go Mairbek. We have a heavyweight fight right after, and one of my favorite fighters in the heavyweight division. I like the way he fights. I think that his skill set is needed at heavyweight because there's so many big strikers. It's always tough when you have guys that are one-punch killers from the bottom of the list to the top, because it is the heavyweight division. You don't necessarily have to be the biggest puncher to still have a massive amount of power, because these guys are so big. One shot's putting you away. And Curtis Blaydes is a guy that has the tools to deal with that, even though sometimes you watch the Francis Ngannou fight, he didn't necessarily get his chance to do that, and Francis just overwhelmed him. But this is Curtis Blaydes versus Samil Abdurakhimov. Again, guys, the pronunciations, I'm trying. I am really trying. So Shamil Abdurakhimov, 38, a significant weight disadvantage, at 30 pounds lighter than Curtis Blaydes, 4 inches reach advantage to Curtis Blaydes, and obviously Curtis Blaydes is only 28. I'm going with my boy Curtis Blaydes. Curtis Razor Blaydes, baby. I just think he has a lot of skills that are really, really good for the heavyweight division and combat a lot of the different qualities that a lot of the heavyweights possess. You see guys like Francis, Derek Lewis, those guys that are at the top of the card, even, DC and Stipe have the wrestling, and they're there because that wrestling ability gives them more variety in their game. It's not just because Stipe's a huge striker and one-punch power KO guy, which he is. Stipe can knock you out with one shot, and so can Daniel Cormier. But the reason that they've elevated their games to the main, top 5, top 2 championship caliber is because they have that wrestling ability and because they have some sort of background and in being able to take the fight wherever they would like it to be. If they're not happy with the striking game and they need to go ahead and close that distance and grapple and get an advantage back, they can do so. And Curtis Blaydes has that same ability, I would say almost to the same level as a Stipe Miocic in his grappling and wrestling game. Obviously, Curtis needs to shore up the striking, at least to find his ways in. He's been caught by some big shots before. So to find his way in, at least, and or to keep himself, to mix up his game and to keep himself from becoming, predictable in his style. You want to see a guy like Curtis Blaydes develop a little bit more on the feet, whether that be, just some entries, being able to use his striking to set up entries, or just being able to stay out of trouble, whether it's, slipping right hands, finding ways around big shots, or even throwing some of his own to keep that pressure off of him and to keep people honest and not just looking for that takedown. Obviously, the easiest comparison to that would be what Khabib did to Conor in their fight recently, last year. Khabib used his grappling used his movement and his feints to be able to set up, took a shot early in that first round. Conor's eyes immediately glanced down to where Khabib's head is. Takes a shot later in the second, immediately. And then obviously the big feint to the overhand right. Stuff like that Curtis Blaydes can definitely use. And we'll talk more about that with Khabib when we get to his matchup with Porier. But Curtis Blaydes can use a lot of those different techniques and abilities, which, I'm sure he is already, it's been a while since we saw Curtis Blaydes, so I'm sure he's already implemented that into his game. But those are things that the reason I'm going with Curtis, obviously a huge reach advantage. That grappling ability that he has and a 30-pound weight advantage is going to be, it's tough. You have a man that's not only 265 pounds, but that's 30 pounds bigger than you are, just on top of you, ground and pound, wearing you down, dragging you back down. You get up, you're back down. That's tiring, and Curtis can do that for all 3 rounds. So I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes there. And then we have a lightweight fight, which I find is one of the more interesting fights on the entire card here, and that's Islam Makhachev versus Davi Ramos. And I don't want to misrepresent Davi Ramos, but I do know he's a champion grappler. I know that for a fact. Excuse me. I know that for a fact. He is a championship grappler. I'm not sure, where that is, what region that is. He's a champion grappler in, but I know he is a championship grappler. Islam Makhachev, obviously, a huge name in Dagestan and I think pancration competitions. He's done really well. Obviously, he's 17-1 in his MMA career. I don't know if he has the same credentials Khabib has as far as it's like a international sportsman, combat sportsman award they get in Russia. I'm not sure the exact terminology for it, but basically a lot of their combat sambo competitions, a lot of their Russian army combat competitions. Islam has done very well in a lot of those same areas that Khabib had grown to become, almost myth, lore, and legend in Russia. So Islam, again, fighting at lightweight, same weight Khabib fights at, same camp. Young guys, 27, a little bit taller at 5'8" than Davi Ramos. But I think the difference isn't going to be the grappling. I think both these guys are phenomenal grapplers. I don't see Islam just taking him down, sitting on top of him, and ground and pounding the entire fight. I don't see Davi Ramos locking up any kind of submission or doing the same to Islam and getting on top of ground and pounding. I think where you're going to see a lot of the separation is going to come from the striking. And Islam Makhachev does possess a lot of power in his strikes because they are unorthodox and they come from these weird angles. And when they hit you, you don't necessarily see them coming. It's like Khabib's eagle punch, where he throws it from weird angles, but it's an overhand that comes kind of like a looping windmill overhand. Islam has had a step-in, I think, jab that knocks somebody down. But he's very powerful and very explosive. Obviously, the grappling competition is something I want to see. I want to see out of both guys, they're very credentialed, who is the better grappler, but I don't think that'll be the difference in the fight. I think those kind of will neutralize themselves to the point where Islam and Davi themselves have to find a way to get some work done on the feet, and I think Islam pulls it out in the decision. I'll say Islam by third round decision. Curtis Blaydes by decision. Sorry, I didn't specify. Curtis Blaydes by decision, and I have no idea about the first fight. We'll just go decision there too. I have no clue. Fight style, anything, but I'm gonna say decision. Split first fight for Merabek. Unanimous for Curtis, unanimous for Islam, and then we get to the lightweight co-main. So that's four lightweight fights on the main card. Not that necessarily they have a lot to do with the title picture, but you can see that there is a lot going to, and this is why I said I thought the 242 card and especially the main event was such a big deal for the future. It was such an important card for the future. While it doesn't necessarily have title implications other than the main event, you do have lightweights all on the card and all with staggering records. These aren't guys that are just journeyman. Edson Barboza's there, Paul Felder's there, Islam with 1 loss is there, David Ramos with 2 losses is there. I mean, these are younger guys that are still in their prime, still looking for that title shot and still looking to climb that ladder. And then at the top of the card, you have the cream of the crop. You have like I said, one of the best that's ever lived in Khabib Nurmagomedov and Dustin Porier. So when you think of those two things, and the fight cards coming up with Cowboy and Justin Gaethje, you're starting to see a little bit of that tight grip and that kind of lockjam at 155 start to loosen a little bit. And matchups are going to be made, and now we have a clear path to the title. But it all starts with this card. And in the co-main, we have Edson Barboza and Paul Felder. Edson Barboza, Paul Felder. Now, this is a rematch. And leading up to this fight, we've seen Edson Barboza talk about how he's a new fighter, right? How now he's an American top team, and we're going to see the best fighter we've ever seen. Now, we hear that a lot from fighters. We hear that anytime a fighter changes camp, we hear, this is the best I've ever been. This is the best I've ever felt. Best condition I've ever been in. And it's tough sometimes to almost take it at face value because everybody says it, right? But at the same time, you do have to look and say that Edson Barboza was lacking what American Top Team brings to the table. You have a ton of grapplers down there, a ton of grapplers. And whether he wants to, take that route with Paul Felder, because Paul Felder is another stand-up striker. I think that the matchup would be in Edson Barboza's favor to stand up and strike with Paul Felder, simply because the technique that Barboza possesses is, in my opinion, a little bit more of a crisp technique than Paul Felder. Paul Felder is a guy that is going to walk forward and hold the guard high, throw some big shots, use some spinning techniques as well, but he's there to scrap. Paul Felder's there to throw the hell down. And so is Edson, but Edson does it almost in a more explosive and quick and dangerous way because it's not a lot of combinations that Edson's throwing. And if it is, he's throwing them to land a big kick at the end to snap that kick off. It's always, a couple of good, nice, clean shots and then a snappy shot, whether it's a snappy kick or a big right hand or a jumping knee or a backing up wheel kick. He has explosive, flashy style. And it's a trade-off, right? Because he's not always going to be able to, and you've seen it, especially recently. Khabib shut that down. Kevin Lee, for the most part, until he got wobbled, shut that down. Justin Gaethje didn't give him a chance, just pressured him, and that's the way you have to beat Edson Barboza, is to pressure him. So in that respect, Paul Felder holds the same advantages that a Gaethje had, that a Khabib had, and is why Edson has gone down to American Top Team to try to figure out a little bit more of that grappling and at least find a way to reset or offset, I should say, the pressure that's going to happen, because Paul Felder's not a guy that's ever been, take his time, get into things. As soon as they come across the cage, Paul's ready to throw right now. And it's going to be an interesting matchup because I do see Paul coming out very aggressive. I see Edson Barboza trying to use those kicks and utilize those low kicks to slow Paul down immediately. Edson does possess a 5 or 4.5 inch reach advantage, so I do see him being able to pop that jab out and keep Paul Felder at distance, at least for the first round. Edson does tend to slow down as the fight goes on. He's a super lean guy. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. You watched Khabib take him, into super deep water in 3 rounds, which, is not the longest MMA fight. We have a 5-round main event fight on this card, but it wasn't you saw Khabib do that to him in 3 rounds. You saw Kevin Lee kind of do the same in 3 rounds, and obviously Paul Felder's game is a little different, but just with that forward pressure, I don't think that Edson over 3 rounds will start to I think he'll start fast, and I don't think as the rounds go on he's going to have that same level of explosivity, if you will. I don't think he's going to be as explosive in that 3rd round as he is in that first. In Edson Barboza's entire game is centered around explosive strikes. Now, again, he has been an American Top Team. They do have some phenomenal grapplers down there and great coaches, some of the best in the world, you might say. So, it's tough. It's tough to pick this fight just as, I've been going back and forth on the main event. I'm kind of been going back and forth on this fight. I could see Edson Barboza winning with something flashy and, being able to pounce on Paul Felder. I don't see Paul Felder getting knocked out cold. But I could see Edson hitting him with something and then following up with a TKO. But I think I'm going to go Felder by decision. I don't know why. I feel like Paul Felder has gotten a formula for these type of fighters where he can overwhelm you with pressure at some point. He's He's looked good against a lot of guys, and because he's such a pressure fighter and because he's in your face so much, Edson Barboza needs a little space to get off some of those bigger shots. He needs a little space to throw that spinning hook kick, that wheel kick or a hook kick, or any kind of those spinning body kicks or any kind of even body kicking at all. You need a little space, and Paul Felder's not going to give you much. He's going to be right in your face the entire time, looking to throw elbows in the clinch, looking to throw big shots to the body, spinning back fists, all types of stuff, and that is going to be in that window phone booth about that big, and Paul Felder's not leaving that spot. So I think that I know I'm probably going against the grain a little bit here. I think a lot of people are picking Edson Barboza to win this fight. I don't know what the spread is on this fight, but I'd be interested to see. But yes, I am. I'm going to go with Paul Felder, just again because I do think that Paul Felder's pressure does end up giving Edson Barboza some problems. And then we have our main event. And guys, I think I've told you this about 40 times since we started the podcast, but I've gone back and forth the entire time. I could see it going to, and this is the thing. So we'll just we'll kind of dive into this fight, obviously because it's the main event. So the narrative around this main event, right, is that Khabib Nurmagomedov is going to beat Dustin Porier, go on to fight Tony Ferguson. That's the real lightweight, the best lightweight in the world fight. That's the real one, right? This is an afterthought. Dustin Poirier's coming in, and he's got great striking. And everybody in American Top Team says he's got great striking. And when he hits, it's to hurt people. So, and that's all great, right? But we've seen that before, right? We've seen guys that come in with great striking against Khabib, and he runs them over. He gets to the leg, he pushes you up against the fence, he puts you on the ground, and he dominates. And that's it. Right off into the sunset, whatever the next fight is, let's get it. And you've heard all week, and again, I talked about this Monday. There hasn't been, until this week. This week they ramped it up, and they've done a good job as far as putting out some packages, and obviously the embedded stuff is always great. But this fight, for the most part, has flown under the radar until this week. And I think it's almost come from the fighters themselves. I think that a lot of the news, I don't even know if you call it news, but a lot of the build-up to this fight, I didn't think that there would be a lot of talking between both guys going back and forth. But as this fight's gotten closer, it's by no means a disrespectful type of thing between either of them. But you can see maybe it's because these guys are cutting weight. Obviously, it's because they have to fight for a world title. But there is no mistaking that both guys do think they see a hole, or do you think they see something in the other one? Like, Dustin Porier is not coming here and he's happy to be in Abu Dhabi, and this is a great opportunity for him to use his platform and all that's great. All that's great that Dustin's doing for his platform and being able to use it for all of his charity work. But this dude is coming here to take that fucking belt. Excuse my language, but he's coming here to do that. Dustin Porier, you can see it on his face. You can hear it when he talks. There is not 1% of Dustin Porier that is afraid of Khabib Nurmagomedov's wrestling, of all the stories, of all the myth lore, of all the legends and fear that's surrounded by Khabib's name and his team's name and his father. Dustin doesn't care about any of it. You watch these embeddeds, and it's just Dustin and his coach in Abu Dhabi right now. Khabib rolled in with 40 dudes, and that's fine. Whatever. That's your crew. That's who you run with. That's how you prepare for a fight. This fool Dustin Porier walks up off the plane by himself, gets his stuff, and gets to his hotel room, and it's just him. It's just him there. You want to talk about a road game? Listen, I played college football. I know about road games. I know about going to different stadiums and everyone's booing you. This guy, not only does he go into a different country, he's going to basically the one country that he could go to and be a 0% favorite. Zero. I think that he's a plus 400 underdog in this fight. That's great, whatever. Vegas lines are what they are. I'd say it's a little steep, but whatever. He's going into Abu Dhabi, and there will be 0 fans cheering Dustin Porier. 0. There's not only a stadium behind Khabib, there's an entire country, an entire region of the world behind Khabib Nurmagomedov. And because of that, that's part of the reason that I'm starting to wane a little bit in this fight. Now, I'm not giving my pick yet, so it's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying look at all the factors to this fight. And Chael Sonnen brought this up on his podcast the other day, and I thought it was a really good point, and no one's talking about it, and I wasn't talking about it. And I think it's important. Khabib Nurmagomedov, quite possibly the most dominant 155er that's ever lived. The Gleison Tibau fight, you could say that there were some good things done in that fight. That was about 8 years ago now. Different fighter we're dealing with. But let's look at things outside of the cage. Let's look at the factors outside of the cage that, regardless if we want to admit it or not, are going to affect this fight. Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting in Abu Dhabi in front of millions. This pay-per-view will do millions of buys. Make no mistake, this will do at least 1 million buys. Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting in front of his people, not just in the stadium, not just a home crowd as far as who's going to be at the event. You're talking about not just a country, but an entire region of the world to have Khabib's back. Khabib brings all of his training partners in. The first time his dad is in his corner. If you ask me, not only that, but he's fighting for the undisputed lightweight title. 28-0, never lost. And if you ask me about all those things, dad in the corner, whole country, never lost, undisputed, first time on the biggest stage, hits him. There's no Conor McGregor there to eat up some of that pressure. This is a ton of pressure for a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov. A ton. Can you imagine? Can you imagine having to put all that on your shoulders and still focus for a fight against a guy in Dustin Porier that you've seen some film on, but how many times in the last, and I have to give credit to my source here. How many times have you seen Dustin Porier get taken down and held down? How many times? Granted, Dustin Porier hasn't fought Khabib, and it's unfair to make that same comparison when he's fighting other guys, but how many times have you actually seen Dustin Porier get taken down and held down? I'll wait. You haven't seen it. I think Luke Thomas said, and this is my source when I say that, I think Luke Thomas said that as of Dustin Poirier's return to 155, he's only been taken down 3 times. 3. Now, obviously, he's gotten a little bit more of a striker-heavy matchup train his last 6 fights, but Eddie Alvarez could wrestle. Eddie Alvarez got shut down in both fights. He did not take Dustin down in either fight. So you talk about what it's going to mean for Khabib to walk into this environment against a guy that really no one's given a chance to. No one's given a chance to Dustin Porier here. People like myself, Chael Sonnen, Luke Thomas, MMA journalists, we see it. I shouldn't call myself they see it. Me, whatever I am, podcast guy, W.A.D.E concept, got a freaking proper 12 bottle behind me. I'm super unbiased. But we see it. We see Dustin Porier. We see the power he possesses in his shots. We see how crisp his shots are. He's not lunging and throwing crazy stuff to leave himself open for the takedown. The guy's protected his legs for years. He's a smart guy. He's pretty simple in his takedown defense. Obviously, fight the hands, get under hooks, try to slide out the side. But the main thing that you have to worry about if you're Khabib Nurmagomedov is kind of the unknown and the pressure it's going to have to take to beat a guy like Dustin Porier. And I'm not saying these things are going to have an overall, they're going to be the overall effect in the fight, but they do have some sort of effect. Khabib, this is essentially a home game, his first one, with on the main stage. Khabib has obviously fought Pancration and all these different tournaments in Russia and in the Ukraine, but this is the first one on his home turf, sort of, with the biggest belt and the biggest stakes on the line. And that you have to account for that. That has to mean something. Not only that, but Khabib has always had trouble making weight, and that was what Chael brought up in his podcast. Khabib has missed weight 4 times in his career, 4 times, and I can understand if you want to give the excuse that, and it's not necessarily an excuse, but if you want to give the explanation that some kidney failure, there's some wrong ways of going about it, other injuries that led up to missing the weight, whatever it was, but at the end of the day, he missed 4 times. What that tells me is, as this guy's getting older, it's getting and it was already hard, it's getting very hard for Khabib to make 155. And that has to be put into play too. the pressure of just making weight for this fight, because it's not just walking into the cage where the pressure is, but you got to make the weight first. And again, with 40 of his boys there and his whole team and his father in his corner for his first time and on home soil and all these fans, that's a lot of pressure for Khabib to make that weight. And you can say, oh, okay, well, these are reaches, and you're reaching for an explanation as to why Khabib might not come in his best. I don't think I am. That's fine if you want to think that I'm reaching. That's fine. But I don't think that I am. I think that what I'm bringing to the table is the fact that regardless of what you think about Khabib, about his camp, about whatever it is, there is a lot of pressure behind him in this fight, and I would say more so even than the Conor McGregor fight because of the situation that surrounds where the fight is, even personally for him, who's going to be there, who's going to be watching, and of course he wants to perform. He wants to perform on the highest level, but then you got a guy across the cage in Dustin Poirier that no one's talking about, and we're going to talk about him right now because Dustin Poirier has almost no pressure in this fight. No pressure. And again, there's something to be said for a guy that almost has, quote-unquote, nothing to lose. I'm not saying Dustin doesn't have anything to lose. He has a world title to lose. That's important. But for him, he's going to a country he's never been to in front of people that are going to boo the living shit out of him. Just going to boo him because he's not Khabib Nurmagomedov. And as this fight's gotten closer, you've seen sometimes, even in the Conor fight, and I hate to admit this because Conor's my guy, but you can see sometimes as these fights get closer, body language, the way people talk, the way they start to reference how the fight's going to go. Conor, in his fight, started to seem like he wasn't quite sure if the preparation was there. And he's even alluded to this after the fact. He didn't know if the camp had gone the way he should have done it. Dustin Poirier, as this week has gone closer, and as this fight's gone closer, has started to almost, the self-belief has almost gone up more and more. Every time you see him on camera, every embedded episode, every interview, Dustin Poirier is matter of fact with how he speaks about this fight. And that he's going to stop Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think I've heard him say that 4 or 5 times this week. I'm going to stop him. Like they're resizing their belts on the embedded episode today. Or he didn't bring his belt, but they're showing him, okay, well, if you win, we're going to put the ruby here, we're going to put your nameplate there. He goes, okay, so when I stop this guy, to the just the belt sizing guy that's explaining what can happen after the thing, and the guy's like, yeah. Like Dustin is, and obviously, everybody comes into a fight believing they're going to win, but this guy, against all odds, coming into this fight, nothing, just stoic, ready to go, and 100% believes he's going to stop Khabib Nurmagomedov, and there's something to be said for it. That confidence is obviously, when the cage gets locked, we'll see. But as it's getting closer, he looks more and more like he's ready to be in that cage with this killer. And because of all of that, because of the fact that there's a ton of pressure, Khabib hasn't really gotten to anybody. I don't know if you can find anybody to mimic Dustin as far as his crisp technique and how he stays balanced, and he doesn't really overexert himself. The key to the fight, in my opinion, for Dustin Poirier is to stay off the cage. Don't get on the cage. And we saw Max back him up a little bit against the cage, and that could be a problem. That could definitely be a problem for Dustin, but you can't get on the cage with Khabib. It's where he pushes guys. Early in his career, Khabib would shoot from what looked like 10 yards, almost outside of the cage. He would shoot on guys, and it would work. But as he's gone on, and as he's faced higher-level fighters, he's been more methodical about how he gets you to the ground. And it's pretty simple. He backs you up against the cage, he gets the single leg, and he puts you on the ground. And then when he gets to the ground, then he's doing some things that are a little different with the pinching of the legs and straightening you out and holding you there, because once your legs are straight out and you're flattened out on the ground, you saw it in the Conor fight, you saw it with Michael Johnson, you saw it with really bad with Edson Barboza. He batters you because you can't move. There's no explosion when your hips are stuck together and your ankles are together like you're being hogtied at a robbery. Khabib is just pinning you on the ground and letting you have it. And so when he gets you to the ground, obviously it's no secret to say you're in trouble, but it's because of the way he maneuvers on top. His top game is revolutionary to how he does it and how effective it is and how, kind of different the movements he has and the different positions he uses. But For Dustin, in my opinion, stay off the cage. Stay away from the cage. Find a way to stop the pressure. Whether it's a big shot to keep Khabib honest, whether it's making sure you're circling away from the cage, stuffing a couple of takedowns to get him to stand with you. Whatever it is, I think that's the key to the fight. Stay off the cage. And if you're Khabib, obviously, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Obviously, you're going to see Khabib go for shots pretty early. I don't think he'll entertain a stand-up matchup unless he has to, or unless he starts to impose his will and get Dustin a little bit more tired, and then start to try to implement some of his stand-up skills as well as obviously the takedowns. But for Khabib, he has to be able to create different looks for Dustin, because Dustin's seen it all. This guy's been around for a decade and some. He's not going to. I don't think he's going to be as easy to take down as a lot of people think. I think Dustin is, again, only been taken down 3 times in his entire career. So as far as the actual fight goes, my key is for Dustin to stay off the cage. For Khabib, it's business as usual. Have to find a way to not get cracked on the way in, because Dustin's accurate too. And Khabib's been working with Javier Mendez long enough to know where his entries and exits are. So business as usual for Khabib. Stay in the center if you're Dustin. And now prediction time. I've been trying to avoid this all day, thinking about it, because I just tend to overthink it. I tend to overthink it and end up screwing up, and you guys all laugh at me in the chat, and you're, you picked so-and-so, and they got knocked out. I can't stand it, man. I just want to get one right on stream. I just want to get one prediction right. Okay. And when we do predictions, we don't just pick the fights, we pick the way they go. And in this one, I'm going to pick how the fight goes round by round, in my opinion. I think first round is Dustin is not necessarily a guy that's going to be a super fast starter. I don't think he's going to come out and look to throw bombs right away, because that'll obviously get you taken down pretty quick. Khabib has never been a fast starter either. I think that Khabib is more willing to entertain the stand-up as the fight starts, just because it's the fight starts on the feet, and you got to make your way into takedown at some point. But to start a fight and to start a round, you got to be on your feet. So I think the first couple of minutes is a lot of feinting by both guys. Maybe a couple shots land from Dustin to give him some confidence going forward. And I think Khabib, again, feints a lot in that first. Maybe finds an opening and lands some shots of his own. But I think Dustin, for the most part, wins the first round. I think Dustin lands more shots. I don't think he gets taken down in the first round. I think that maybe Khabib shoots for one, kind of right in the middle, center of the ring, kind of that long lunging shot, just to get Dustin to think about the shot itself, and maybe use the same game plan that he used against Conor with the feint to try to go low and get that takedown early, just to come back and feint it later and throw something over the top. We are looking at a guy that will have a southpaw stance in Dustin Porier, so that could be an opening he's looking for. So I do think Dustin wins the first round. I think Khabib comes out in the second, and that would only mean that Khabib's second loss of a round ever. I think Conor's the only guy to ever take a round from him. So that would only be Khabib's, officially, I don't know if that's true. I think Gleison Tibau got a round from him, but officially, I think that would only be the second round Khabib's ever lost in the UFC. So Khabib comes out with a little bit more urgency in the second round. I think he walks Dustin down and starts to push him up against the cage a little more. I do think he gets Dustin down in the second round. I don't think he's not going to get Dustin down to the ground. I do think he gets Dustin down, but in that second round, we see a little bit more of a fresh Dustin than maybe we saw with Conor or Edson Barboza. And I think Dustin, while he gets he takes some shots there, or he loses some position, I think he finds a way to minimize the damage by either getting up or by creating a kind of a stall where Khabib's not really throwing any shots, Dustin's not really taking any damage, but Khabib is controlling the positioning. So I think second round, Khabib controls a lot of the positioning from top. He might land a couple of shots. I don't think anything super intense. And then we move to the third. And in the third, I think is where the tide changes a little bit. And I hate to say it, but guys, as much as I just made the case for Dustin Poirier, as much as I just, laid out every option that Dustin Poirier has to his advantage coming into this fight and every reason Khabib could lose this fight, I think in the third round, Khabib starts to turn the tide and turn the pressure up on Dustin Poirier. And the reason I'm leaning toward Khabib is you watched a guy like Max Holloway fight Dustin Poirier. In those first 2 rounds, Max Holloway had a lot of success on backing Dustin Poirier up against the cage and landing big shots. Well, I wouldn't say big shots, but landing some crisp shots. Dustin Poirier fought off that pressure and landed his big shots by, throwing the big left hand and cracking Max Holloway and wobbled him. I think it was in the first or second round. The problem is when Khabib is pressuring you forward, he's not looking to stand and strike with you. He's not looking to exchange and throw big combinations and use that as his pressure. His pressure is to get you up against the cage and then take you down. And I know Dustin Poirier is aware of this. So it might take a little longer in the fight to implement that, whereas Max Holloway could kind of pressure Dustin more because the game plan was to let him come forward and then bang some shots over the top that are heavier than his combinations because Max has great angles, crisp punches, but Dustin knew that if he let him come forward and he hit him with some big shots against the cage where he was kind of in that counter position waiting for Max to extend, he could alleviate the pressure. In this case, you might be able to for a couple of rounds, but by the time that mid-third round comes and Khabib is on your legs again and again and again, and the pressure is there, and it's just not relenting. He's forward. I do think that Khabib will get a little frustrated and maybe get a little wild, but at the end of the third round, I think he'll start to implement I think he'll get a takedown on the cage, and the ground and pound will start. And by the fourth round, you'll start to see a little bit more of Dustin slowing down. The punches not being, as hard or as forceful with the intent to kill behind them. And that's where I think Khabib goes in, whether it's submission or TKO. I think Khabib gets Dustin to the ground, starts to really do some damage, and then maybe locks up a submission on the ground, maybe rear naked choke. Kimura, not sure, but I think that's the way the fight goes down. I think while Dustin is going to come in looking for the finish on Khabib Nurmagomedov, and very well could. These are just a guy with one person watching in his chat making predictions. What do I know? Obviously, you guys, if you've watched my MMA weeklies before, you know that I don't know a ton, obviously, because I don't win a lot. But when it comes to the prediction for me, I think Khabib by late fourth round submission. I think Dustin goes out and gives it every single thing he has. I think he has some success early. I think he takes a round from Khabib, either the first or the second. We're saying the first, but I think he takes one of those early rounds from Khabib and frustrates him. Because as much as Khabib, dissuades away from pride and how his pride affects him, how he shouldn't have any pride, he's also a very competitive fighter. And I would say the most competitive fighters. You hear stories about him at AKA not losing rounds in sparring, like just coming in wild, not wanting to lose a single round. And obviously, since he's gotten older, that's dissipated a little bit. But as far as the actual fight goes, you take a round from Khabib and I guarantee in his home, where his people are in Abu Dhabi and his dad in his corner, you take one of those first rounds from Khabib, that's huge. That's a huge swing in momentum for Dustin. And if that does happen, you could very well see Dustin Poirier start to implement his will and start to implement his game plan against Khabib, with a little bit of maybe a shaky confidence after that first round if Dustin steals one. But I do think that Khabib recovers, gets a little frustrated and comes out and secures a win by late fourth round submission. We'll say rear naked choke or Kimura. Or Kimura. If he gets a rear naked choke and a Kimura, Jesus Christ, he's the best fighter to ever live on at any time, ever. But yeah, that's our prediction. I'm sticking to it, man. As much as I would love to see Dustin go in there and get that strap and bring it back to the States, Khabib is bred to be the old. You couldn't. I don't know where I was watching this, but someone said you couldn't, like in a laboratory, you couldn't make better conditions for a world-class fighter than Khabib Nurmagomedov had to grow up in. The hills of Dagestan, surrounded by war, trained in almost every combat sport offered in the Russian Union, and by his own father, who was the judo combat sports expert in that region. Growing up in 4 or 5 different disciplines: pancration, Russian army combat, wrestling, sambo, like all these different respects, and then coming over and using them, combining those with the high-level striking coaches at AKA, you forged a damn near perfect fighter. And Dustin Porier is going into his house and trying to say, nah, not quite perfect. But we'll see, man. We'll see. That's my pick. And so we're going Khabib by late 4th round submission, Paul Felder by decision, Islam by decision, Curtis Blades by decision, and split decision for Merabek. So we're going 4 decisions and a stoppage for Khabib. That's my picks, guys. Those are my picks. And like I said, it's not the most stacked card overall as far as name recognition and people you'll know. But these names that are, and it's just like in any other card. Like, think about 3 years ago, Khabib Nurmagomedov was relatively unknown. The only people that knew Khabib were people that were MMA fans, through and through. The people that were watching Conor McGregor that night didn't really know who Khabib Nurmagomedov was. At least not the way they know him now. When he was talking about how Conor McGregor was a chicken, and he got booed for saying that Russia 150 million, Irish 6 million. He got booed. MSG booed him out of the building for that. And now you look around, 3 years later, and the turn that's happened for Khabib, and how not only the eastern side of that region that he's from, they're super behind him. But not only that, but now you look at the Western Hemisphere, and people in the U.S. and Canada are really big Khabib fans. The UK, people love Khabib. He is, and there's no reason not to. He is the definition of the perfect fighter in the cage, as well as, a guy that supports and preaches humility and respect for his opponents and for the sport itself and for everyone. So you can't really hate on the guy too much. It's just when you see his name at the top of the bill, 5-6 years ago, he was unknown. So maybe Islam Makhachev, maybe Davi Ramos, maybe some of these fighters are the next up. Maybe they're right there in the wings, waiting to see what happens with this first division. And then, as they follow their journey, they're on their way up. So this is not the most name-worthy card at the moment, but be looking out for names like we mentioned that are on this card that will, have a long-standing, you're going to be in those divisions for a long time. I blanked on the word there, but basically they're going to be around for a long time. So we're going to see some guys that don't have names yet, but in a couple of years we'll be right there at the top of the billing with the Khabibs and the Dustins and the Paul Felders and the Edson Barbosas. So, but yeah, guys, that's it. A quick 50 minutes on the podcast today. And again, I'm so sorry that we're not going to be able to have it on the Apple Podcasts today. It's just, I'm trying to figure out how to not let you guys hear the stream Saturday while also hearing my voice, because I have this set up and it's all cool looking and everything, but I have no idea how to use it. So if any of you people are computer people and you know what you're doing with a mixer and all the inputs and the different sound cards and all that good stuff, hit me up on my Twitter, here in the comments. Let me know. We'll chat it up. We'll figure it out. But until then, and until Saturday, 7:15 a.m., we're going to be here. I'm going to be right here, same spot. We're going to be watching the entire card. That means early prelims, and main card. We're going to watch all 3 together. And we're going to find out, guys. We're going to find out. Can Dustin Poirier shock the world? I don't know. And I guess we won't find out till Saturday. But until then, this is the W.A.D. concept, and you guys already know we are debating everything. I'll see you guys Saturday, 7:15 a.m. Pacific, 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. Peace.